Faint, yet somehow enough to set the heart racing. A short while later, outside the second-year girls' dormitory, Moen stood blankly in a corner, leaning against the wall. He tried to make himself as inconspicuous as possible. They had agreed to meet downstairs, but he couldn't shake the feeling that standing here might not be such a good idea. He looked around. Since this was the girls' dormitory, the area was filled with girls from his year coming and going. They passed by in groups of 3 or 5, some carrying books, others holding shopping bags. Laughter and conversation rose and fell all around him. Every pair of eyes paused slightly upon noticing Moen, then lingered on him, as though drawn by a magnet. Those blue eyes, that golden hair, and that handsome face, seemed to be bathed in a golden halo beneath the setting sun. Every girl who passed by stared at Moen's striking face. Some looked curious, others studied him closely, while a few showed their admiration without the slightest attempt to hide it. And after the incident with the evil god, the students now saw this duke's son in a completely different light. Quite a few of them were already showing signs of infatuation. Several bolder girls even waved at him, shy smiles appearing on their faces. But Moen sensed that something was wrong. A faint chill crept down his spine, as though an icy finger had lightly traced the back of his neck. He couldn't help but shudder. Aside from these girls, there was another faint gaze that seemed to remain fixed on him. It was cold and clammy, like the forked tongue of a venomous snake, slithering across his back. Several times he suddenly spun around, only to see girls walking past in 2s and 3s, chatting and laughing. There was nothing unusual. Even after Sari appeared, the feeling didn't disappear. Instead, the sensation of being watched grew even stronger, as though a pair of eyes hidden in the darkness were closely following his every move. Just as Moen's nerves were stretched taut, Sari's voice suddenly rang out. It was bright and cheerful, like the pleasant chime of a bell. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Moen." The girl held an exquisite basket in her hand. It was woven from white wicker, and covered with a piece of red floral cloth. She jogged over to Moen, slightly out of breath from running. Her chest gently rose and fell with each breath. The movement wasn't particularly pronounced, but the way her uniform clung to her body made it especially noticeable. Moen's gaze involuntarily lingered there for a moment. Before he quickly looked away, Moen lifted the red cloth covering the basket. Only after opening it did he discover that it was filled with all kinds of small cakes. There were strawberry, blueberry, and chocolate cakes. Each one was delicate and petite, decorated with fresh fruit and swirls of cream. An enticing sweetness drifted through the twilight. The rich scent of cream mingled with the freshness of fruit, instantly awakening his appetite. They all looked absolutely delicious. Moen's eyes immediately lit up. Surprise sparkled in those blue eyes, and the corners of his mouth unconsciously curved upward. Finally, it wasn't another fruit basket. He secretly rejoiced. His week-long nightmare of being tormented by fruit baskets could finally come to an end. Apples, bananas, grapes. He had eaten so many that the mere thought of them made him sick. At last someone had brought him cakes. The girl shyly covered her face and whispered, her voice carrying a trace of nervousness and anticipation. "I made all of these myself. My family isn't well off, and I don't have much money, so this is the only way I could apologize." She lowered her gaze, her long eyelashes trembling slightly behind her lenses. A blush from running still lingered on her cheeks. Her fair hands were clasped nervously in front of her, her fingertips gently rubbing together, as though she feared Moen might think her gift was too cheap. Her voice was filled with unease. "They may not compare to those expensive gifts, but I put my heart into making them. I hope you'll like them, Moen. In that case, I'll gladly accept them." "Thank you, Sari." Moen gave the girl a gentle smile. It was sincere and warm, like winter sunlight in the gathering dusk. His golden hair fluttered softly in the evening breeze, and his voice carried heartfelt gratitude. "The thought behind this is more precious than any expensive gift." "Then I'll just—" The girl's voice suddenly became hurried. Her gaze darted around, as though something were chasing her. "I won't bother you any longer, Moen. I'll bring you some new pastries to try next time. Goodbye." The girl suddenly bolted into the girls' dormitory. She moved as quickly as a startled rabbit, her skirt fluttering as she ran, and revealing her fair calves. She soon vanished behind the dormitory entrance. The door slammed shut behind her, swallowing her figure completely. Moen had no idea what had just happened. He stood where he was and waved, a hint of confusion in his blue eyes. Then a gentle smile returned to his face. She seems like a pretty nice girl too, having received 2 gifts in a single day. Moen was delighted. His handsome face was filled with satisfaction. But soon he glanced behind him, and his expression gradually turned grave. A sharp glint flashed through his blue eyes. If it wasn't sorry, then my top priority is figuring out exactly what's been following me. He took a deep breath, carefully placed the basket of cakes on a stone ledge by the wall, then turned and headed toward the mountain behind the academy. He wanted to see exactly what had been following him all day. At that moment, the girl hiding behind the girls' dormitory entrance was still gasping for breath, her fair hands pressed against her chest, where she could feel her heart pounding violently. A complicated expression appeared on her youthful face. But in the next second, the corners of her mouth twisted into an eerie grin. It was completely different from her earlier innocent sweetness, carrying a meaning that sent chills down the spine. A dark gleam flashed through the eyes behind her round glasses. It disappeared almost instantly, as though it had merely been an illusion. She slowly raised a hand, and gently brushed her fingertips across her lips. In the darkness her smile became increasingly distorted. Moen raced toward the mountain behind the academy, moving swiftly through the forest in the fading light. His golden hair streamed in the wind. He pushed through patches of shrubbery, and circled around ancient trees, his steps firm and swift. Fallen leaves rustled beneath his feet, the sound unusually clear within the silent forest. Finally he stopped in an open clearing. Towering trees surrounded him, while the sky above was gradually growing darker. Several stars had already begun to sparkle against the deep blue heavens. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the branches and leaves, casting mottled patterns of light and shadow across the ground. This should be far enough. He took a deep breath and turned around, his gaze sweeping across the surrounding darkness. His voice was calm and forceful. "Come out. Is hiding in the shadows really that entertaining? You've been following me all day. I know where you are." His voice echoed through the open forest, carrying an unquestionable resolve. The only response was the rustling of wind through the treetops, and the distant cries of several nocturnal birds. The moment his words faded, that sickening smell of blood appeared once again. It was overpowering and pungent, mingled with the stench of decay and rust. Something suddenly lunged from behind Moen, bringing a foul gust of wind with it. The instant Moen heard the movement he whipped his head around. A massive black shadow was reflected in his blue eyes. He kicked off hard against the ground, leaving a deep footprint in the soil beneath him, and narrowly avoided the attack. The dark shadow swept through the spot where he had just been standing, creating a powerful gust that whipped his clothes and hair through the air. After regaining his footing, Moen cursed aloud. Then, with lingering fear and gravity in his voice, he muttered, "What incredible speed!" But a moment later, a deep growl caused Moen's pupils to contract sharply. It was dull and resonant, as though rising from the depths of the earth itself, filled with primal savagery and murderous intent. Standing before him was an enormous Volf-like monster 5 or 6 meters tall. Its entire body was covered in rotting blood. Dark red liquid constantly seeped from its fur, dripping onto the ground with a sizzling sound, and corroding small pits into the grass beneath it. Its 2 eyes radiated a cold light in the darkness. They were a ghostly frost-like blue, strikingly bright in the twilight. Low growls continuously rumbled from its throat, as it bared rows of pale fangs. Every fang was as sharp as a dagger. Its gigantic body cast a heavy shadow in the fading light, completely engulfing Moen. The decaying blood covering its body gave off a nauseating stench. It carried the odors of death and rot, making Moen's stomach churn. The monster's tail slowly swayed behind it. Every movement stirred up a bloody gust, sweeping the surrounding leaves into the air. Before they fluttered back down, its gaze remained firmly locked on Moen, like a hunter examining its prey. There was no emotion in those ghostly blue eyes, Only the purest murderous intent and hunger. Moen slowly took a step back. The monster's massive figure reflected in his blue eyes. He knew. There was no avoiding this battle.